Message from Teamsters Local 1932, a strong and successful labor union based in San Bernardino that represents over 14,000 hardworking people across the Inland Empire. The Teamsters are ready to help you organize for better pay, increased benefits, and improved working conditions. Reach out to Teamsters 1932 at teamsters1932.org/organize to speak with an organizer today.
The views of the following show are not necessarily the views of Broadcast Management or its owner, Fred Lundgren. But then again, the views of Broadcast Management are, well, different. And now it's time for On the Mark Live with host Mark Westwood. Finally, a show about KCAA. Hot topics, a little locomotion, current events, news, laugh, reviews, and a little irreverence. And you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, 3, 2, 1, Mark.
And here I am. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Wednesday afternoon, the middle of the week, here just a little bit after the 2 p.m. hour. I'm Mark Westwood, your host, and glad to be here with Frank Perello in the control room. And, of course, I have a guest back, and we're welcoming him back again. We had such a good interview the first part of the week with Randy Korgan, who is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Teamsters Local 1932. That's the lead officer, I believe it's called. The
principal officer.
The principal
correct.
officer.
Yes.
I was trying to figure. Get sent to the principal's office. Principal's office. That's right. But Randy is a big guy with the labor movement, volunteering his time since 1993 at the age of 21. He's a passion for worker justice, cemented labor advocate, helping thousands of people organize since. He served as an organizer, director of organizing, business representative, coordinator, international representative, international trustee of District Council 2 and Teamsters Local 630, co-chair for the Southwest Food Industry Teamsters Council, personal representative to the General President and director of organizing for Teamsters Joint Council 42. And forgive me, that sometimes that's a lot to say, but you have a lot of qualifications there.
I've done a few things over my time. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, you've created a comprehensive training program as well that's trained and developed dozens of organizers and volunteers on various projects, organizing throughout the region, Western United States, and the country in a number of industries. You can take credit for a lot of stuff, Randy. And some of that is just your work ethics, never being afraid to work hard. 11 years of age, you and your brother, you threw papers every day for the Sun newspaper.
Yeah, remember the Sun Telegram? Fontana
Yes.
Herald? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, they're almost papers still. And the Sun newspaper's still there. It's called the San Bernardino County Sun now these days. It used to be called the Sun Telegram. I remember that, getting that every day too. And back in 1993 as well. You just kind of you are motivated. That's a good thing, and that's a good thing to have you with the labor movement, because the labor union movement is very important in the United States. And last week, it's not last week. It seems like it, but the last time we had you on the show, which was about 4 days ago, we talked about everything from the contributions of unions to a little bit of labor history, and just various different things. Talked about Amazon quite a bit. And I was amazed. I've been quoting this ever since to find out Amazon, 46 Amazon centers now with 40,000 employees.
Yeah, it's crazy. The size and the scope. They've built their first distribution center in 2012. Mm-hmm. That gives you an idea of how fast that growth has happened.
And Amazon as a company started off as a big book distribution company. Used books, not even new books.
Right. You don't see bookstores anymore, do you?
No. And there's a good example of what happens at the mom and pop shops and things like that. Amazon comes in there. Amazon makes Walmart, by the way, look like Santa Claus.
Makes Walmart look like a liquor store on the corner opening up.
It's true. It's very true. And we know how big Walmart is. And, they're not exactly the leader of worker rights or benefits or wages or anything like that. And we've talked a little bit about them, too, last time around. But Amazon, oh, my gosh, 40,000 workers. Excuse me. And so, there's, a lot to talk about unions. So I thought, well, let's bring Randy back. And let's give him the chance to talk some more, because unions are so very, very important. So today we're going to talk about everything from how unions work to picket lines to what happens and how strikes come about, Also, the union and President Joe Biden relationship, and of course, some contributions you've made in the community. And some of those big contributions are pretty substantial. In the control room is Frank Parolo. He lives up in Crestline, and he was one of those people that got buried under 20,000 feet, it seemed like, of snow. We didn't see Frank for like 2 weeks. He was just gone. He was a goner.
How long did it take you to see past the snow in your windows?
He's got to turn the mic on now.
Oh, my
Just
bad.
a second. That's all right. He's getting there. It's like getting up on a horse in there.
We had snow for about, on the ground, we didn't see dirt for about a month. And then that was just in the sunny spots. And I actually had to shovel my roof because it was on a risk of collapsing. We were seeing cracks in the ceiling, so we had to get on the roof and spend 2 nights shoveling 10 feet of snow off our roof.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And your roommate
Wild.
had their car
Totaled. It
from the snow.
crunched the windshield and dented it, and water got in there and just made it all moldy while it was, because we didn't see the car for like 2 months. Like, we weren't able to get in it.
Gosh.
We just stuck to my car, luckily, getting that dug out, so I have 4-wheel drive. And yeah, the end is he had to get a new car.
Yeah. And so what's the temperature these days up there in Crestline?
You know, it went from in the 20s during that week to about 90. The highest I've seen it this month, July, was like 98, which was crazy. 'Cause I don't think I've ever seen it 98 up there.
Hey, but global warming doesn't exist, right?
No, definitely not.
Doesn't exist at all. But you know, Frank is just one story on the Windy Mountain, so to speak. There were thousands and thousands of residents that were stranded, houses lost, roofs caved in. Of course, you know that because the Teamsters had a lot to do with unburying the mountain.
Yeah,
Tell us about it.
It's amazing. Teamsters actually cleared the roads. It's Teamsters that clear the roads. Teamsters actually are the ones that drive the trucks up the hill to make sure that the grocery stores have food, to make sure the kids' schools have food, to make sure the restaurants have
That's really
food.
important.
All the essential services that are delivered up there, soda, water. Obviously, soda's not essential, but it's a drink.
Hey, to some of us it is.
Those are all Teamsters that actually carry that cargo up, drive them up the hill.
And risking their lives at that point because it wasn't like a clear road and an easy trip up there.
Yeah, it's very difficult, especially talking to a lot of the individuals that participated in, number one, clearing the snow to begin with, because those are Teamsters with the county of San Bernardino and or some of the cities that work up there. We actually represent a number of cities on top of the county. And then clearly, you know, your Stater Brothers drivers, your Vaughn's drivers, everybody else, U.S. Foods, Cisco, they're all Teamsters as well. And, you know, they take great pride in making sure that community, that individuals just like you ended up getting their food as quickly as possible. And then it goes a step further. You know, the Teamsters donated their time to help clear, you know, driveways and walkways, took their time to work as caregivers because some caregivers couldn't get up the hill, you know, bathe the elderly, really took the time to, you know, hand out food, make food, do all the things where individuals were caught in very difficult situations with helping with firewood, you know, just there's one particular story that was pretty incredible. A Teamster did that works for the county of San Bernardino. They had a Scat Cat, one of those real good snow machines. Snow machines are pretty crazy.
They use them on the side of ski.
And areas that the fire and police couldn't get to. There were a couple situations where people, there was a couple fires, and a couple situations where individuals were hurt, had heart attacks. And our member actually was able to use their Snowcat, Scat Cat, whatever it's called. Snowcat, and get that those individuals out of the building, out of the homes, and you know, it's just incredible stories of what Teamsters do every single day. You know, the partnership with the community has always been precious to the membership. It doesn't get talked about a lot. Everybody wants to talk about the movies and what people see about unions in the movies, which is all obviously a dramatization. The reality is that Teamsters in our community every single day, and union members. I'm just kind of fond of Teamsters because, you know, I've been one my entire adult life. but all union members do a really good job of
They're just
making the
regular
community
people.
go around. Yeah, that's right. They are the community.
They're not big union thugs like people say.
No,
Union
they're not.
thugs.
Right. It's
They're
so-
guys with families and kids and
They coach
wives
baseball, right?
and baseball.
They donate their time. They do all these great things
Mhm.
in the community.
Right.
Yes.
And working honest and working hard and trying to get a good wage and some good working conditions. That's what the Teamsters are guilty of, and helping a lot. I know that the roof of the supermarket, Jensen's, I believe it was, just collapsed. There was no supermarket up there, so the food was literally, correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, was being distributed in the parking lots.
Yep.
And that was Teamsters doing that.
That's right.
Yeah, Goodwin's was the one that fully collapsed, and then Jensen's had to close shortly after because they were afraid it was about to collapse, and
that's
they
right.
saw some sagging. They were distributing what they could. I was lucky enough to live right in it. I live right by a gas station within walking distance. We actually cross-country skied there once. And so I was able, what they could keep stocked, we were able to get some. But yeah, the supermarket, they were out helping, and it was awesome to see. But the market is still on the ground, so.
Yeah, almost all your product that gets delivered to those markets, not just the grocery stores, but the convenience stores, and a lot of those are Teamsters that are actually carrying that cargo and dropping it off, and so sometimes we just don't remember. UPS driver, right? Your package, postal service driver is a union member. Sometimes we forget about how dependable unions are and union workers can be.
And as you're in the middle of a contract negotiation with the county of San Bernardino. Why? Because a lot of those county government workers are Teamsters.
That's correct. Yes.
That's kind of amazing to know that.
It's and it's kind of like it's fun. It's for me the way I grew up in my situation to now be able to represent the very workers that protected me as a child is very empowering. It's very rewarding, and it's cyclical in a very positive way. And to see how much these workers that these pillars of the community that work for the county of San Bernardino care about their job and care about the community and try to help every day. It's tough to see them get villainized as greedy public employees, because they're not. They're just good people working hard, trying to support their family every day.
I would suggest a name change, but it probably would go over like a big thud. But instead of Teamsters, you call them Guardians.
Yeah.
Guardians, Local 1932. Just renamed your organization. Sorry about that.
We had a nickname of Guardians of the Road back in the days. Teamsters of the Highway, Guardians of the Highway, because it was always known that if somebody was broke down on the side of the road, a Teamster would pull over and help them get to safety, or fix the vehicle, or get them fuel. And it's interesting you bring up the term guardian. In our history, we actually remind parts of our organization, don't forget that we were the guardians of the highway.
Guardians of the Road, Guardians of the Highway. And obviously up in Crestline and Running Springs and Big Bear, all throughout the San Bernardino Mountains that were just buried in the snow, that then started to take its toll with flooding and everything else. You were there, and you were guardians of the public, and that's who the county supervisors came to, right?
That's correct. Many of the individuals that are on the board of supervisors, immediately picked up the phone and said, "How can we partner up to mitigate, to work hard to deal with the situation, to deal with the emergency?" And everybody went to work. And that's a situation where you don't get into partisan stuff and your prior differences. You just make sure you put your differences down, and you just immediately get to work to help other people. Those partnerships in the community are very valuable to our membership, and I think will always be valuable. And we don't talk about it enough. Not we as in my organization, but the general public. It just doesn't get talked about enough. I'm very appreciative that I could actually say this on the air right now to everybody out there, because it's a very empowering story, especially when you sit down and you meet with these individuals. Like Amy Shackelford sticks out for me, talking about the scenarios where she was handing out food and moving firewood and trying to get it to residents, and the challenges of that in the circumstances when everybody was snowed in. How much they care about trying to accomplish the goal of helping other people.
People had to stay warm. It wasn't like it was a warm temperature after it snowed. it was pretty cold.
Right, and there was a loss of power, and the only thing that was going to save them was some firewood. Yeah.
Right. So getting the firewood out there. Elderly people who couldn't hardly get in and out of their houses as it was, couldn't get groceries, couldn't get things like that. Like you said, couldn't get their just basic hygiene needs taken care of. Teamsters kicked in for that.
Yeah, county employees, even those that are not Teamsters, did as well. I got to give them credit too. I can't just steal it all for us. Obviously talk about what we're doing, but it's good to see in those moments of emergencies or crisis.
Well, county health workers are Teamsters.
That's correct. They sure are. They happen to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Those are a good example of guardians.
That's right.
And that's what it is all about, People working together, holding hands, becoming that rope instead of the individual strings, and helping people out. And it's a wonderful story. Lots of wonderful stories that can be told, I'm sure. There's probably story after story if you talk to individual Teamsters that they have that, they could tell you. It was a moving experience for them too.
Yeah, and they carry those situations with them their entire career, and I'm assuming their entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And they always reflect back on 'em. I know, hurricanes that have happened across the country. We've always had a rapid response team as far as the overall arching organization, and you still hear stories of who jumped in to try to help and get to Houston or get to Louisiana or get to New York or get to Puerto Rico. And all of these disasters that have happened, you always reflect back on. That's when people are at their best, is when the challenge is in front of them. And we're very proud of our membership, and we're proud of unions, their accomplishment over the last couple hundred years, because that is the core of what it's all about, even if others don't want to talk about it.
When there's an immediate disaster or need, they're there, and that's a good thing. But there's also long-term needs too.
Absolutely.
I don't know whether you've noticed, we got a challenge on our streets for homeless people. I'm sure that the Teamsters are helping a little bit with that. I'm sure that the job training helps a lot with that. People are able to get training to get better paying jobs that help them improve their lives and their quality of lifestyle.
Absolutely. We have a training center at Teamsters Local 1932. Our training center is partnered up with a number of high schools in the region. We have a high school, from high school to high paying jobs initiative that we try to explain to children, obviously young adults, and that transition to try to land them in the best possible jobs. And then when it comes to the homeless issue, clearly that's a crisis, and in a lot of ways, in most ways, it's actually a healthcare crisis. It's a mental health issue, and it's an enormous challenge. We do our best to try to help out as well. There's a lot of times we feed the homeless, we do events, stuff like that on a regular basis. We can't do everything, we can't fix everything, but you just try to chip in where you can.
Exactly. It's there's a story about, guy goes on the beach and there's, a million starfish all over the beach. They're obviously been washed up by the tide, and the tide's gone back out, and then, has shipwrecked them or abandoned them on the beach, and these starfish are going to die. And the guy picks up a starfish and throws it in the ocean, and another starfish, and the guy's with him says, you can't possibly get all these starfish back in the ocean, so what difference is it going to make? He says, the difference is it made a difference with that starfish. And that's individually what a local trained worker can do, somebody that is a professional in what they're doing. And you talked about that just now, high school to high-paying jobs. In this world, we all have been geared towards get into high school and then get into college and, get a degree, and then you'll have a lot of money. And then that kind of changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years. You get into high school, you get into college, you get that degree, and then you have a lot of debt.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to get a good paying job.
Then you're looking for a Teamster job.
Right, because you're not that well trained. There is nothing wrong, Randy, and I know you won't correct me on this one. I know you won't correct me, from getting a well-trained vocation, a job that, that pays well, that is like a union job, and it'll provide for you, your family, the people you love, your community or whatever. And there's, a lot of our high schools and schools need to re-equip themselves with the vocational stuff that they've let drop down, like auto shop and wood shop and all those kinds of, electric shop and all that kind of stuff. But in the Teamsters Union, you talked about having a training center.
That's correct. And our initiative is really about building relationships at the high school level and getting young adults and adolescents to recognize there is a pathway. And because not all of them are going to go to college, those that are on their pathway to college are usually pretty set on it and understand their path. But also recognizing that this overemphasis of college and with it the devaluing of regular jobs, middle-class jobs, has created part of this crisis we're dealing with right now in this country. And that is this and what's happened in the Inland Empire that I'm about to spell out. An individual graduates from high school and then lands in one of these warehouses, because these warehouses, the warehouse industry is the biggest industry in the IE. And then they bounce around, usually in a temporary agency or part-time from facility to facility, and then they get hurt. And unfortunately, most of those warehouses are non-union warehouses, and they're not landing at 18 years old in the union warehouse because they're the highest paid. They got very good benefits, and they can typically take the most qualified of that.
Most trained, yeah.
The most trained, the ones that have been in the industry. Now, what we found in the last few decades is those that have been bouncing around the industry at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old actually picked up a lot of bad habits from these employers because the employers didn't have, these non-union employers didn't have good training. They don't have an emphasis on making sure that the work environment is very safe. They don't have an emphasis on making sure that a person doing the job, that it's not just throwing boxes. There's kind of a craft to it. There's a skill to throwing boxes. Think of a UPS driver. Like, it's a great example because it's someone you can see. They're throwing boxes all day, but they got techniques, the way they go in and out of the van, the way they carry a package, the way they carry something heavy. All those things are trained over a long period of time. And you may think, oh, it's no big deal. It's just carrying a box. Well, after you carry boxes all day, every day for months on end, you learn, I need to figure out some good techniques to make this a little easier on my body because it's very physically demanding. And so there's a craft, especially those of us that came out of the warehouse industry. We're aware that there's this unsaid craft in it. And so
some
we
technique, some finesse.
That's right. There's techniques. There's a way to take care of your body. There's a way to handle the scenario or the situation so that you can have a long career in the industry.
And guess what? When the worker knows those techniques and finesses and all that stuff, they produce more.
That's right. And they're less likely to get hurt.
Right. Less likely to get hurt. And they're producing more for their employer. And we're going to talk more about that. But, we're at that time of the hour here where we have to take our break. We're going to do that. We're here with Randy Korgan, the Secretary-Treasurer, the Principal Officer of Teamsters Local 1932, right here in San Bernardino. Their office is down on Sierra Way and... Fourth. Sierra Way and 4th Street down there. And a really nice facility there. Also next to it is the Arrowhead Credit Union, if that helps you mark it.
That's the old Arrowhead Credit Union. We actually bought the building.
Oh, did you? So they're not there anymore?
No, their ATMs are in our parking lot. We leased the ATMs to them because we could see the amount of volume that comes through. But actually, our new training center and the expansion of our operations has moved into the old Arrowhead building. Okay, we'll talk about that then, too, more after the break. Learn something new every day. Always learn from a Teamster, right? KCAA, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM. I'm Mark Westwood, and we'll be back with more on The Mark after this.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 AM, the station that leaves no listener behind.
It's that time of year again. No, not the holidays. Medicare open enrollment. And if you have questions about Medicare, you should talk to the local experts. Paul Barrich and Associates. Paul and his agents are certified with plans that are accepted by most of the medical groups in our area. Call 909-793-0385. Their services are free, and after 41 years in the business, their agents are trained to help you pick the plan that's right for you.
Hi, I'm food critic Alan Borgen, and I'm excited to tell you about Ray's Shanghai Bistro, located next to Redlands DMV on Lagonia in Redlands. Ray's Shanghai Bistro offers the largest and most delicious array of traditional and original Chinese dishes available in the Inland Empire. Some of my favorite dishes are the house-made pot stickers, the crisp pork spare ribs with garlic, their unique spicy lamb with bamboo, the sweet and tangy deep-fried orange peel beef, and the savory basil spicy shrimp, plus lots of vegetarian dishes. Whether you dine in, pick up the food, or have them cater your next party or special occasions, you will see why Ray's, spelled R-U-I'-S, Shanghai Bistro, is truly the best Chinese restaurant in the Inland Empire. Their website is raysshanghaibistro.net. That's raysshanghaibistro.net. R-U-I-S, shanghaibistro.net. Happy eating. You won't be disappointed.
And now it's time to batten down the hatches, because here comes more of Mark Westwood and On the Mark Live. 3, 2, 1, Mark.
Mark. Okay. Sounds like a hair lip dog. I'm Mark Westwood. We're here today with Randy Korgan, and we're talking about Teamsters and unions and organizing and all kinds of great stuff. I just found something out just before the break, and that is that the old Arrowhead Credit Union has moved their corporate office from down there next to them on 4th and Sierra Way, and now the Teamsters have taken that over, and it's a training center.
Yes, it's
Good.
We've moved some of our building into it, plus we have our training center located inside.
Oh, very, very good. Very good. And so, that's some of the things that the Teamsters do. We were talking about that before the break, and the training and everything that happens. They also stand up for workers. Stand up not just for pay, but for workers' rights, for safety, for good working conditions, something that the people in Amazon, the 40,000 employees, are a little lacking right now because, at 46 Amazon centers, and the employees aren't there for more than a couple of years, maybe, if I'm over-exaggerating, 3 years maybe, and then they move on.
Less than that. Their turnover is less than that.
I'm sure there are examples of people that have been there for 10, 15, 20 years. No, they can't be because they haven't been there that long.
Yeah, the long-term examples are very few and far between.
Yeah, long-term examples are very few and far between. And so once in a while, just like I mentioned also, you're in negotiations with the county of San Bernardino, the government entity, to get their workers, the Teamster workers, more rights. Those are healthcare workers at the hospital. Those are the counter workers at the different various government benefit areas, drivers. There's all kinds of different workers under the Teamsters.
Yeah, most of the employees that work for the county of San Bernardino are Teamsters. We represent them in all in the 863 classifications that we represent across 9 different bargaining units.
And so when you're bargaining, collective bargaining is what that's called, because they're collecting together to bargain, and that's allowed under the National Labor Relations Act, because California is not a right-to-work state. And right-to-work states, Randy, I'm sure you could tell better than I could, the difference between what we have here and in a right-to-work state.
Yeah, wages are far less in right-to-work states. Injuries are higher. People have less retirement benefits.
Because those states outlaw collective bargaining.
They don't completely outlaw it. In some areas they outlaw it, and then they limit the collective bargaining, and then they allow for the weakening of the labor laws as a result of the so-called right-to-work label. It's very misrepresented.
Right. And so in California, it's legal to collective bargain and negotiate and to have a union. And, it's not all that way. There's about 19 states that don't have that. And you see the dramatic difference, even in their minimum wage. It's about $3.50 less an hour than what we have here in California, just for the minimum wage.
That's correct.
Entry-level jobs. And then, substantially, the higher paying job it goes, the less money that people are making if they're not represented by a union. And so unions sometimes have to go to the table. They have to bargain. They have to negotiate. Maybe it comes to arbitration, sometimes what they call binding arbitration. But, it's a good thing they can do. And we're all talking about SAG-AFTRA right now because that's the big thing. If you've not heard, or maybe you've just been watching TV after the writer's strike, the writers right now are on strike because of the working conditions, because of wages, and also because of technology.
That's right.
Artificial intelligence that may be replacing some of their duties and things like that. So there's all kinds of things that have to happen that unions have to protect us from. And so let's talk about that. If it were to go, to the point where you have a strike, that's where everybody goes, a strike, and they're out there with pickets and things like that. And in particular, I know that like if there's a picket line for food workers union.
Yeah, like the grocery stores in 2003.
Right.
Yeah, that's
I won't cross that picket line. I won't go buy from that store until, it's resolved. And so let's talk about crossing a picket line and your thoughts about that.
Well, I think the best way to explain it is a picket line is a demonstration, and workers have walked off the job and said, we're withholding our labor because the employer and us can't agree on whatever those terms and conditions are. And they're asking for the general public to support the protests. And so let's break down the protest. In our Constitution, we have the right to protest, correct? We have the right to freedom of speech, the freedom to assemble. And this country was formed on a protest, right?
Absolutely.
And if we water down or don't respect somebody's right to protest, then we actually are abandoning one of the original principles of trying to escape the the grip that England had on us, correct?
Right.
And so as our country being formed as a result of a protest, you have to look at when you see workers on strike, what's their protest? And sometimes you may not even agree with what the differences are. Maybe if you were in the circumstances, you would have a different opinion. But when we can at least respect the other person's right to protest and we honor that, you may have a protest someday yourself that you're asking.
You need that support for.
That is correct. And that is the fundamental idea behind honoring a picket line, is making sure that my protest is respected and recognized today so that I can respect your protest tomorrow. And as a result, we become more collective in our ability to have balance.
Yeah. And I like to break it down even a little bit more. Every worker, whether it's in a grocery store or whether it's SAG-AFTRA and a writer or an actor or in a warehouse or wherever they're working, those are all people who are parents and brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and family members. They're trying to make a living, and they're trying to get a better shake. And if I cross that picket line, I'm crossing their home.
Undermining them.
You're undermining them, and undermining them in a big way. And so, like, oh, yeah, those grocery store workers make a lot more money than I do. Well, that may be true. That means maybe you should go get some more training or get a better job or whatever you're going to do. But the fact is you got to respect them, that those are principal members of their family, principal wage earners who are trying to provide everything from education to health care to food on the table. And if you cross that picket line, you're undermining them. You're like taking money out of their bank account.
That's right. Corporate America wants you to think when you walk up to a picket line that you should take from them to get for yourself. Those workers that are asking you to honor the line aren't trying to take from you anything. They're trying to get corporate America in some sense, or their employer in some sense, to have the appropriate balance and a fairness in whatever the dispute may be. But corporate America in the last few decades has been very successful at getting workers to fight with each other and basically say, well, you have good health care. I don't have good health care. Right, divide and conquer. I don't have good health care, so why do I care about your fight? Well, the reason why you should care is because maybe one day you are fighting for good health care and you don't have it yet.
Or a family member might be doing that.
A family member's doing it, and you need other people's support to make sure that you can gain that. Because you do have a right to ask for something better from your employer. You absolutely do. Should you go too far? No. That's where the balance is always tough to be stricken. And reasonable minds resolve the issue 99.9% of the time. Nobody wants to rush on strike. But when that strike happens, it's really, really important for people to pay attention to another person's protest and respect the right that they have to protest and say, you know what, I'll take my business somewhere else. I'll go somewhere else to do it. Thank you for notifying me that this is what's in dispute at this point.
It's called solidarity.
That is correct.
Solidarity, that you're solid with them. Because, how would you like it if you're a grandpa and your grandson is just trying to provide food for their family and they can't do it, or somebody else's grandson, or a neighbor, or somebody like that? You should not cross those picket lines. And even worse, you should not try to replace those workers, especially when you're not qualified or trained. That's called being a scab.
That's correct.
And those are the lowest of low in my mind. Right?
There's a lot of terms for them.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just going to make some money for my family real quick. No, you're taking the food off the tables.
That's right. Obviously, there's two pieces of crossing the line. There's one if you're just going to buy something, and then there's one that goes even further, which is to work what they consider working behind a picket line. And if everybody honored each other's picket lines all the time,
there wouldn't be picket lines.
Number one, there wouldn't be picket lines. And number two, the distribution of wealth would be spread out a whole lot better. And we wouldn't be fighting over health care, and we wouldn't be fighting over retirement plans. You know what would happen is that everybody would have a much better pay scale, and their retirement vehicles and their health and welfare and their medical would all be in much better systems.
You have just hit on something. The distribution of wealth. And the more, the politicians and the big corporations say, redistribution of wealth. That's what you're trying to do. No, we're trying to have a better, equal, more level distribution of wealth. And it's amazing. There was a statistic that was probably about 15 years ago that 65% of the wealth in this country was held by about 12% of the people, the very wealthy. And since then, it's gone down as far as the amount of wealth we have, and their wealth has gone up, to now the statistic is like 92% of the wealth is held by less than 1% of the people.
Yeah, and how did they do that? I think that it's really important to point out that transformation, that transition that happened in the last few decades. The way they did it is they convinced us all to fight with each other, number one. And then they secondarily did it by
demonizing unions.
Unions and trying to make us look like we're terrible and horrible. And they fundamentally pulled the money out of workers' pockets by making them pay more for their health and welfare, making them pay for insurance, where it used to be employers were proud of the fact that I pay 100% of the health care for my employees. I have the best retirement vehicle for employees. Come to work for me. If you come to work for my employer, we have the best of these. And then it transitioned for the redistribution of wealth. And then what they did is those trillions of dollars that have been pulled out of the system, because there's also a whole argument to how they pulled it out from the tax dollars too. That's a separate subject. But in this case, this example, that money's been put in CEOs' pockets, executives' pockets. We can see that corporations have made higher profits than they've ever made in the history of this country in the last couple decades. Well, the money didn't just get printed out of thin air. It actually came out of workers' pockets by reducing how much their contribution was in those benefits.
I say subverting.
Yes.
Not the redistribution of wealth, subversion of wealth. In other words, that wealth, the many have lost their wealth and their strength and their power for a few. We're talking about...
Or straight up stole it.
Straight up stole it. Right. Let's think about this. Let's break this down. I've had people say to me, Randy, and this just blows my mind, I vote this way or that way, or I'm not for unions because I want to protect my money. And I'm like, but you're not wealthy. No, I'm doing pretty good. I says, no. You think you're doing well. You think of somebody, even this is on the lower end of the people who are well-to-do. Somebody makes $350,000 a year. And you break down that amount of money by 12, which is the number of months in a year, and you find out, and you break it down by the week, you're finding out, and by the month, they're making like $14,000 a month. The average person does not make that. Very few people make that. And that's at the lower end of the spectrum. When you get up to union CEOs and those people that are directly under them, and there's a whole bandwidth of those people, a larger bandwidth than they realize. They're making $3-4 million a month.
You don't mean union CEOs. You mean CEOs and companies.
Did I say union?
You
I'm
did.
sorry.
That's
Oh,
okay.
so
That's okay.
Smack my mouth. No,
No, we don't make $3-4 million a year.
No. I'm talking about corporate. Let me correct you there. Corporate. We can bump that, right? That's almost like a bad word. Anyway, corporate CEOs and the bandwidth of those workers, there are people that are directly below them. They're making tons and tons and tons of money. They're so much more wealthy than you are, even if you think you're well-to-do. Even if you think you're well-to-do because you're making $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year, you're at the lower end of the spectrum. You're not poor. You're not homeless.
Right.
If you're spending your money right, you're doing okay. But the average wage in Orange County, for instance, if you're not making $150,000 a year, you're considered on the poverty level. San Bernardino County is a little different, but we've got to have unions. We've got to have collective bargaining. The ability to band together, and to do that, unions are the best answer to it. To go for better wages, to go for a bigger piece of the pie.
They're the only consistent argument in this space. Unions in the last 100+ years have been the only consistent argument over and over to protect workers, to obviously engage in discussions that protect retirement plans, that protect health and welfare, that argue for a safe work environment. You can't find another institution or any other institution that or group of people that have spent that much time consistently fighting for working people.
Yeah. If we didn't have unions, our children would be working. Our children would be working. We would have 22-hour work days. I mean,
isn't that where we started?
Yeah, that's where we started. And back in the 1700s, that's the way it was. You just worked around the clock. They give you some time to go to the bathroom and maybe catch a cat nap so that you get back up. And we had working zombies is what we had.
And when you died, they just tossed you in a hole.
Right. Working zombies. Or they locked you, like I said, in an upstairs room, like the international labor, not the women that worked in that factory. They didn't have a union at that time. But there's a reason why the garment workers was formed. Locked you in a room, caged you in, locked in back behind iron gates, and the place caught on fire and you burned to death. I mean, that's the amount of respect that profit capitalism has for the workers. And so the workers have to stand up. And the only way to do that, the best answer to do that, is to have representatives. When you're a union member, you have something in the shop that's called a shop steward. Right.
That's right.
A shop steward that you can go to and say, hey, that Mark Westwood, he's not treating us right, or he does this to me or that to me.
He shorted my paycheck.
Or shorted my paycheck, and can you go to the boss for me for that? And for that, it's recognized that shop steward's not going to be retaliated against because he's doing his job for the union, and then the employee has a little insulation from retaliation or okay, you want to collect your paycheck, I'm just going to lower your hours, that sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen on behalf of the worker by unions, and that's why unions are a good thing. That's why I have you here. And what can you do if you're not a member of a union? A lot of people say, well, I'm not a member of a union. I don't work in an industry that has a union.
Well, it's interesting to say that because the Teamsters actually represents every classification of worker in America. We represent everything from airline pilots all the way to zookeepers, A to Z. And every worker can have a union. Every worker can be represented. I know somebody, I can't, I shouldn't. That's not true, and it's not a bad thing for the employer either. I deal with a lot of employers that recognize, hey, to keep my management team in check, I need to have a union contract, because sometimes middle management, sometimes you have a business owner or a corporation that is responsible, wants to do the right thing, but they're large and they need they need to make sure everybody in between are doing what they're supposed to be doing and making
Keeping
sure
them in
workers are
check.
taken care of. And the best way to do that, their best regulatory factor is a union contract. It's better than any law that can be written.
You can actually, ironically, save them money.
But, many times, I cannot count how many times I've been in bargaining with an employer and been like, look, I know this proposal looks like it's going to cost you more, but we've penciled it out, and it actually is going to save you money by investing in something on the front end. And sometimes you're so busy jumping over a dollar to save a dime, you're not paying attention to the circumstances.
Well, we've been talking with Randy Korgan. We're going to continue that discussion. Randy is the I want to say he is the secretary treasurer of the Teamsters Local 932, and the principal officer. It's a pleasure and honor to have you here today, sir. We're talking about the contributions of unions and how you can get involved with the union. And you know, one of the things you can do before we get to that, I want to make sure we give your website out so people can get in contact with you. It's pretty easy, if I remember right. Teamsters1932.org.
Very easy. That's correct.
Teamsters1932.org. Teamsters1932.org. If you're looking at us on the web, it's right there on the screen right now. And you can always call KCA, and I will gladly give you those numbers and show you the way to get to the Teamsters if you need it. And that's something that you can always count on. I want to say right now that before I go into this last little segment here, that we're proud to announce that beginning Monday at midnight, we have a show here at noon called The Rich Smith Show. And it's 1 hour. But at midnight, from midnight to 2 a.m., Rich Smith is going to be on for a replay, and another hour we don't get to play on every day, Monday through Friday.
Yeah, Rick's a great guy. I've known him for many, many years. I go on the show quite often, and he does he's if you haven't listened to him, tune him in. He does a great job.
Great job, great performance. You will swear that you're listening to the opposite end, and you've gone through another he's got a voice that's kind of like Rush a little bit, Rush Limbaugh, but he's total opposite of Rush Limbaugh.
Slightly.
Slightly. I think he would be insulted if I compared him too much to Rush Limbaugh, but that is the case. Get involved. And there's another thing I want to talk to before we go in the last 7 minutes or so. If you're not a member of a union, if maybe you don't have the intent of joining a union, maybe at the end of your career or, whatever, however that works, there's some things you can do. Number one, we talked about don't cross a picket line. Respect the picket line. Respect the union organizers. Make sure, for instance, and particularly that you don't become a union scab, not a union scab, a scab.
Right.
A scab in general, where you're taking the jobs of union workers who are striking. That's kind of lowest of low. You may think it's just temporary, but you can really prolong it and cause a lot of damage that way. But lastly, vote. V-O-T-E. Really easy to do. In California, you can do it with your voter registration, your motor voter registration. You can do it online. You don't have to wait anymore for a length of time if you want to register to be able to vote. You can register and vote the same day. You may have to be verified, but you can, we're not just letting anybody vote, but, they'll take what they call a provisional ballot. You can vote, and we'll look at your ballot and count it, provided you're a citizen of the United States, provided you qualify to do that you live in the district that you're voting in and all that kind of stuff. So that's a good thing. But to vote for candidates who support unions.
That's right. We have to get to a space where candidates are supporting working people and not inflaming these wedge issues, these issues that get people all worked up and mad at each other and fighting. And at the end of the day, they don't help them make their paycheck a little bigger. They may argue, we need to reduce your tax burden. But every time I hear that, I don't see the person who's actually arguing to reduce the tax burden to actually reduce the tax burden of the middle class. They actually were trying to reduce someone wealthy's tax burden. Another subject for another day.
You don't want to vote, by the way, for union-busting candidates.
That's correct.
A good example of that, and you love and adore and adulate because you're a Republican. You don't have many other people to love and adore and adulate Ronald Reagan. But he was a union buster. The Air Traffic Controllers Union no longer exists because of Ronald Reagan. He broke that union.
Yeah, a lot of people, ironically, he was the president of SAG-AFTRA at one time.
Isn't that amazing?
And then when he became president of the United States, a lot of people do hold him up and admire him. I'm a former Republican myself, but the more I learned about history, the more I recognized the bad decisions that have been made. And Reagan was devastating to unions. I mean, devastating.
Exactly.
Over decades, that policies put in place during his administration, and the air traffic controller, the permanent replacement of the air traffic controllers.
And they had all kinds of air disasters after that.
That's correct. Busted it wide open.
And, can directly be blamed for several air disasters that happened right after that, because it wasn't safe to be in the air because the air wasn't being controlled right. And so, I hate to sound partisan, but that's the way it is.
Well, and on that issue, real quick, funny thing is the Teamsters actually endorsed Reagan, and to have him go back and do something like that after he was endorsed, was really insulting to union workers across the country.
Oh yeah,
and it really
betrayal is what that's
was a betrayal. Called. That's correct.
Betrayal
Absolutely.
is what that's called. So let's talk about, because we got just a few more minutes here, and I get too partisan, but I don't think Donald Trump was very pro-union. But the current president, Joe Biden, has a pretty good track record, right?
Yeah, Biden's had a great track record. Trump was his policies that he put in place were very, very anti-union. As a matter of fact, at the Republican National Convention for his re-election, one of the first things he did out the gate was prop up somebody that was anti-union, and they were arguing about the Frederick case at the time. And it was unprecedented. The Republican Party had never done anything like that and been so blatantly open about opposing unions. And then, obviously, Biden prevailing in that election. Within 3 months of him taking office, he passed ARPA. He passed legislation that saved pension plans in this country that should have been passed more than a decade before. Obama was unable to get it passed. He should have. It was one of his failures. Obviously, Trump didn't get it passed in any reform when it came to pension plans and making sure that they had the same protections that banks did. Banks were able to get trillions of dollars bailed out when the financial crisis happened, but they tried to villainize union pension plans. This wasn't going in the pockets of union leaders. These are workers who depend on a retirement plan that had been hit just as hard by the financial situation of the recession, and no one wanted to bail them out. Biden pulled the trigger on a bipartisan effort, was able to get that passed, and that saved millions of pensioners and future pensioners, working people's livelihood into a time that they're most vulnerable.
President Biden did one thing. One thing was an old hand coming in from the United States Senate, and it was able to pull some stuff off that shouldn't have been able to pull off. He inherited a stinking hot mess, to be quite honest with you. People fighting on the Capitol steps and shooting each other, and it was just a mess. And he straightened out a lot, and then passed some good legislation. And the reason he was able to do that is he came out of the United States Senate, and he was a career senator. And he actually, even though don't like Mitch McConnell myself too much, worked with Mitch McConnell for a lot of years. So he was able to get some things through. And that was a good thing. So, when you vote for candidates who are pro-union, you're voting for unions. You're voting down the line for the worker and for their families and for their children and for their educations and everything else. It is something that's vital that, number one, you vote. And I'm not going to say that only vote for Democrats, because those words didn't come out of my words.
It's not partisan. Vote for those that support unions.
Right. And
working people.
And who can tell you that better than a union? The AFL-CIO, the Teamsters, the IEW, the International Electric Workers Union,
UFCW,
UFCW.
yeah.
There's lots of the acronym. Yeah, SCIU. All those people, because they experience it firsthand, all that alphabet soup, can tell you. And so pay attention to them. Go log on to a union website like Teamsters1932.com. They'll have on there, during elections especially, who they endorse.
Yes, we put out an endorsement list.
And it's not a good old boys popularity contest.
Yeah, and it's got Republicans and Democrats on it.
They got boards. These candidates have to go in front of the board. They're asked, what kind of car do you drive? Where do you shop?
What's your policy
what's
on
your
a
policy?
specific issue? Why did you vote a certain way on a policy?
And if they have a track record, they're
Correct.
questioned on their track record. And how would you vote on this? And they're questioned about their knowledge and experience and expertise in the field of labor relations and workers' rights and things like that. They better have the right answers, and they better have the right track record. And when they do, they get endorsed,
Correct.
whether they're a Republican or Democrat. I'm just telling you specifically about Biden and Trump or Reagan. Those are the good examples of the people you best know. But on the county and the local level, there's all these candidates go through a screening process called COPE, I believe it's called.
Yes.
Committee on Political Elections, if I'm not mistaken. And they go through a panel that's made up of everybody from the IBEW, from the International Food Workers Union, to SCIU, to the Teamsters, all of those different unions. Sit down and talk to them. They've got to have the answers. And if they don't have the answers, then they don't get endorsed. And that's why it's such a pleasure today to talk to you once again. We're going to have you back. There's so much more to talk about. It's intricate. It's layered. It's multi-layered about unions and how they work. But we have had Randy Korgan with us from Teamsters 1932. Is the Secretary-Treasurer, the Principal Office of the Teamsters Union. The President of a union is not necessarily the top officer. It's usually the Secretary-Treasurer. And you've been doing this for how many years?
I've been the principal officer at 1932 for 7 years.
For 7 years in the battle, on the front lines. Thank you, Randy. We appreciate you. And it's good to have Rich Smith on there. And the Teamsters support and put their money where their mouth says and help us put that show on the air.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate it. Thank you for being
for
here
having me.
for the second time in a week. We'll have you back again. I'm Mark Westwood on KCAA 1050 AM, 106.5 FM. Take it away, Frank.
KCAA Loma Linda.